Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to another Sunday edition of Conversation with the Love Crusader. And yes, it's the month of June, and it's our domestic abuse month. So it's the month where we highlight and talk about, have conversations around domestic abuse. Every year in the month of June, we've dedicated it to that conversation. If you're coming across the platform for the first time, it's called Conversation with the Love Crusader, and it's a platform where we talk about love, we talk about life, we talk about relationship, all in a fun way. Okay, sorry, my TV is connected. My TV is picking it up. Can someone put up the TV? All right, sorry, people. Um, with me today, last week we started talking about domestic abuse and stigma, and we had a survivor here telling us about, the stigma that is associated with domestic abuse, the types of stigma, and how to recognize them and how to overcome them. And we left off saying we really need to speak up. We need to speak up. Today we're talking about domestic abuse and trauma. So, what is trauma? How is domestic abuse and trauma related? How do we identify trauma from domestic abuse? Please share, call your friends, um, and let's dig in. I have in the studio my usual co-host, Titilayo. Thank you so much, giving us her time to come again this week. We appreciate you. Thank you, Titi. Welcome. And my friend, my sister, sometimes she will ask me, why am I the one that you're calling to come and say these things? She know why, or she's not asking me. But Yomi is not a stranger to anyone who knows conversation. She's not a stranger to my professional person, and she's here again on Conversation with the Love Crusader to talk about DA and trauma. Welcome, Yomi.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Very
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome. Okay, let's try to give it a background. What is trauma? Can we put a bit of a definition to what we are referring to when we talk about trauma? We cannot start defining domestic abuse because I think we've done that separately. So let's talk about trauma and then maybe how it relates to domestic abuse. Yomi, you can start.
Okay, so I would define trauma as being, like an experience that someone has that causes pain, um, that causes some form of damage, some form of hurt, some pain that the person experiences, that the person has through that experience. And so usually it's something that lingers, especially if it's not dealt with, if the person does not go through a healing process. So it's really just a wound on a person's heart, and it can be like an open wound,
Mm-hmm.
um, which you know you will then go through other things in life that would remind you of that experience. So
Mm-hmm.
you have people who may have gone through childhood traumas, or traumatic events when they were children, and then as adults, because that wound is still open. It's open because it's not healed. If you if you fall down and you bruise yourself, you bruise your skin. If it's not treated, if you don't apply certain things to it, it will remain an open wound. Of course, over time, it would your skin will probably close up, especially if you're a child, it will close up. But for traumatic, or it would your skin will probably close up, especially if you're a child, it will close up. But for traumatic, or can
Go
I keep
on.
going? It
Go
looks
on.
like there's a
Go on. Yes, there's a feedback coming into
feedback.
studio. Go on. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so for traumatic experiences, you might have had the experience years and years ago, but then as later on in life, you might then have things that will trigger it, which means that the wound is still open. It will
Mm.
trigger it and you will still feel the pain, like like you are having that traumatic experience all over again. Um, you could also have it in a way that the experience leaves a scar. So there has been some healing, there's been some treatment that has happened, but the scar is there for you to see all the time. And depending on the level of healing that has happened, will determine what happens every time you look at that scar. So it's possible for you to look at the scar and still feel the pain. So it's like a numbing pain, like uh, if you had like a really bad accident, for example, and I'm talking about like a physical accident, and maybe you maybe one had like, okay, let me give a personal example. My son had we had an accident in the house where our fence came down, and part of it caught my son's leg and he broke his fibia. Now, because he's a child, of course, the healing process was much quicker. But if, for example, he left a scar on his leg, every time that he looked at that leg, it's possible for him to remember the experience or that's traumatic experience. And again, like I said, depending on how much healing has gone on from that traumatic experience will determine the emotions that you feel every time you look at the scar. So that's what I would define a trauma as, having an experience that brought about pain, um, physical pain, emotional pain, um, sometimes even mental pain, but brings about some amount of pain. Um, and if not properly dealt with and healed, it can linger on for years.
Titi, do you have something to add before I make my comment about that?
I think I agree. I agree with her 100%. The pain that you get when, as a result of some event that has occurred in your life, and the pain is just there. Sometimes it just goes on and on. Sometimes you don't even realize it. Sometimes we react based off of that event or that pain. We don't even know that that is what is going on. It's really sad.
I totally like the description of the wound. I totally like that description. I think it's a fantastic, there's no other way to describe it. It's like a wound. And if that wound is not treated, the wound is not, like some people have a very small cut, but they leave it, or they are careless about it. Before you know what is happening, that cut can become, so infected. I'm not the one, I think it's Sister Titi that can, medical people. They might explain it more than me. But you know what I'm trying to say? It becomes so infected. I have heard that they've even had to sometimes amputate somebody's leg or hands just to save the rest part of the body because a wound is infected. So this is what trauma is. It's that wound that someone got that either they don't even know the wound is there and so it's not being treated properly, and it keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. Fantastic. I like it. Now, because this thing stays in the subconscious sometimes, it's difficult to, will I say, identify. So, what do we do to bring it up? Let's start from there. If there's trauma in my subconscious, is there anything I can do? How do I even know that there's trauma in my subconscious?
Hmm, that's a really good question. I think that I'm not sure there are ways to bring it up, unless you actually have, like I said earlier, you go through experiences later on in life that trigger it. So if, for example, you maybe as a child, you had, the experience of abandonment. um, you felt abandoned by your parents, you felt abandoned by people you love, and that was a traumatic experience. I mean, it would be a traumatic experience for any child,
Mm,
to feel abandoned. You just didn't have people who said they will be there, were never there. And
mm,
so when you now become an adult, there are certain things, certain ways you will begin to play out in your relationships with people,
mhm,
that you first and foremost, you would have trust issues. If you've had abandonment issues as a child, you'll find it difficult to trust people. When people tell you, oh, okay, I'm going to do this for you, you don't believe it. You don't believe that anyone would keep their word, because you've experienced that so much as a child. And
mm,
so growing up as an adult now, you look at everyone, with a suspicious look. Yeah, like, you don't, and sometimes people don't connect the dots. They just find that that's how they are, and so it's in the process of counseling, because if, for example, you have just using this example of abandonment, when you get into a relationship, because everybody is created for connection. So when you get into a relationship, because you have trust issues, it's going to affect your relationship. No matter how much you love this person, no matter how much you guys think you're good together, there will
mm,
always be trust issues. So it will now become a situation where you tell yourself, okay, I need to find help. I don't know exactly what's going on, because it might have been that it has caused the first relationship to break up. The second relationship has not worked. The third relationship is on the brink of being destroyed as well. And you're not so sure what exactly is going on. You just find that you can't just trust people, and you're wondering why. What's the connection? Where did this come from?
mm,
Until you come to a place of counseling and therapy, and certain questions will be asked, then the dots will begin to connect, and then you begin to say, oh, so because, especially if it's a lady, for example, if it was her father who always said, oh, I'll do this for you, and he never did, or her father who abandoned her at a young age, or the
mm,
trauma came from her dad, being in a relationship and being able to trust men will be difficult. And then, so it's in a place of counseling and therapy that those dots will be connected. Um, I don't think it's something that we can just sit down and figure out on our own, because first and foremost, you're not even sure. I mean, you can only heal what you can name. If you can't name it, you can't heal it. So if you don't even know it's trauma, how then do you begin to heal it? So it's usually from in the place of counseling and therapy that healing comes through.
mm. Okay. Mama Titi, oh yeah, say something.
Yeah, I think it's like is as we go through life, um, as we relate with people, you begin to pick up certain things like maybe what people say about you, or maybe you just discover probably from relationship. It's just something that we realize. And again, by the time we realize is after effects of the trauma, after effect of the wound, when it begins to manifest, that's when you realize, oh, um, this might be trauma. Just like she said, most times we don't get it. It takes us a long time before we realize, oh, so this is what it is.
Mm,
It takes you consciously wanting to be better. So I'll just say to be open to being better generally. And if you have that mindset of wanting to be better generally, across your path, at some point, you would find out what the effect of trauma, or what it may have the effect it may have had on you. And I don't think there's any of us that is really exempt from, yeah, the magnitude may be different, but as you go through life, you're not an island. So you come from a family, you have parents, you have siblings. If you didn't have siblings, you have people you related to like siblings. At some point, you would experience some form of trauma or the other. It may not be as huge as you think it should be, it may not be as, but even that tiny bit can start growing, and the effect can be as devastating the as people that have experienced something huge too. So we just need as humans to be open to being better. And in the course of working towards being better, these things begin to come up. So yeah. I can't hear you.
When did I mute myself? Anyways, all right. Sorry. Muted. I was saying to Titi last week that maybe very soon, I'm getting there, I will be a guest and get the opportunity. Why is your me laughing? Maybe your me will host me that day.
Yeah.
Let's
And
do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
get the opportunity to share and talk about these things because look, I can't shy away from it. It's what I've experienced, it's what I know can happen to someone.
Yeah.
And what I have experienced with trauma is, especially trauma from domestic abuse, you don't really understand how deep you've been wounded. We're not talking physical trauma, that's there. I mean, some people who are not as fortunate and as blessed as I am live with permanent scars and injuries and from physical abuse. So that one is so obvious.
Yeah.
But the emotional one, the PTSD, the fear, the what comes after. And I mean, like I said, your miss part of my story, so she knows this story maybe more than Titi. I don't know that Titi knows some of the story too, but anyways, you know, she was part of it in the heat of it. It took over 10 years, 10 years for me to realize how traumatized I was from those experiences.
Mm.
So this is where the challenge is, like we say, most times in our subconscious, we don't know that it's there. You know, you forgive, you move on, you some people leave and they think living is enough. It's not even enough to live. You might
Mm.
leave the situation, but are you healed? So there's still a lot of work that goes on with, oh, reconciliation or not, leaving the abuser or not. After that, there is serious work that needs to happen. If not, you would be bleeding on those who did not cut you.
Yeah.
And I like all of the fantastic examples you've given. You become this withdrawn, aggressive person. You become distrusting of people. You become fearful. I know I became fearful, so much so that if someone were to shout around me, I'll go into a dark place. Just
Mm.
even if they're not shouting at me, shouting at someone else, I'll just go into this dark place. And God save you if you meet me at that time. You might not like the version of me
Okay, you see. Yeah.
that you will see or that will react to you at that particular point in time. It has taken lots of work and I'm still a work in progress. I can't tell you now that I'm totally healed. But what I'm grateful for is the privilege to have been able to now realize that this is the problem, which is why I like to talk about it and educate others. It's not enough that you had this experience and maybe you've left your abuser, you are now on your own, and you might think life is great, you are safe or whatever. Sometimes we still need to go one step further. All right, Let's talk about the type, some of the signs. How can I know? We've already started picking them. Let's try to list them. Let's help someone. I've given you one example, that is being easily startled or fearful. You know, someone is, and it might even be a good shout. Someone is shouting a good shout around, but my own heart is racing and I'm startled, I'm scared. Yeah, it's taking a lot to say that now, but yeah, that's what used to happen. So let's talk about some of those forms or signs that someone can look at and say, all right, I think I still have some residue of this wound. I still need to work on the wound.
Okay, so if we're gonna, well, I guess we're looking at it specifically in relation to um, domestic domestic abuse and
Yes.
domestic violence. So people who go through, at least from conversations that I've had, with people who have gone through domestic abuse, one of the things is they live with a victim mentality.
Mm,
So they always see themselves as the victim. If they Whether they stayed through in the relationship, or if they came out of it but failed. So they always, so in every situation that they get into in life after that, they always see themselves as a victim. So they always put themselves in a position where they, well, let me not say always, but most of the time they could find themselves in a position where they are getting the short end of the stick, because
mm,
they've been in an abusive where, whether it was physical, whether it was emotional, there's been some, damage to their self-esteem, self-worth. Um, so, living the victim mentality. You mentioned fear. There's the thing of, looking down on yourself. So you think, in fact, there are some people who have gone through domestic violence and they think that it's their fault, that the
mm,
experience that they had, that the reason why their spouse was, and it could be either way, male or female, the reason why their spouse was able to abuse them, or was because it was their fault. It was something that they didn't do right. Maybe they talked too much, or but there's nothing that you could have done to excuse someone else abusing you.
mm,
So those are some of the things that people experience when they go through domestic violence. And connecting it to trauma, for example, if someone also, as a child, s- attached love to being beaten, because as children, we always want the attention of our families.
mm,
We don't know, any attention is good attention, whether it is attention from being beaten, or attention from being put in one corner. As long as they were giving you some form of attention, it was good attention. And so you have parents who, when they are beating their children, they'll tell you, I'm doing this because I love you. So that child now grows up to equate love to being beaten.
mm,
So if that kind of a person gets into a marriage where either the wife of the or the husband is beating them, and maybe they even say the same thing, that I'm doing this because I love you, or they don't, but they find that when something happens, they as far as the person is concerned, they're going to be like, oh, okay, this is another expression of what my father or my mother used to do to me when I was a child, and so I understand that this is his way of showing love.
mm.
So that's a traumatic experience that has been taken into adulthood and is now allowing domestic violence to thrive. So that kind of a situation, of course, the person needs therapy.
I
Yeah.
think for me, that's the most fearful part of this whole drama and picture that we're painting here. The childhood trauma, and it comes sometimes even from from the children who have witnessed also abuse, who have been in families where abuse have taken place. Some of them now feel, in fact, statistically, it is said that most men who have abused their female counterpart have seen their father do the same to their mom, or have seen, a parent do the same. So they kind of come up with what they are doing is what they've learned, like a learned behavior from childhood. This is what scares me most, because especially in children, sometimes it might not be easily identifiable until they are maybe grown, until they are maybe now into adolescence and teenage years, and you begin to see some behavior and you're wondering, where is this coming from? And just like you've given the example, a child who, I mean, I think that's how a lot of our parents flogged us, telling us it's because they love us. I'm punishing you because I love you. Abititi, is that not what they used to tell us? They say they punish us because they love us. So maybe our husbands and wives are supposed to punish each other. Oh my
So
God.
for some of us, they didn't even tell us.
Oh, they did tell you?
It's just imputed. Like, that's another level of trauma. It's just imputed in that all these things, everything I've done, all the sacrifices and everything is so that your life will be better. It's not even love now, so that your own life will be better. So you go on feeling like I should replicate these things to whoever it is I say I love,
Hmm.
you know. So that is another level of trauma on its own. So it's ingrained in your subconscious, such that when people begin to complain about your learned behavior, you are wondering, what are people talking about? This is the way we show love. You know, it's funny, but it's sad. It's
Hmm.
really sad.
We are swimming in a very, very wide ocean here. The way I'm seeing this matter is getting plenty of legs, branches, tail, and all. And I know that 1 hour already, half the hour is gone. 1 hour is not going
Hmm.
to be enough to deal with this. But I want us to just specifically point one, two, three as we are pointing them now. I think I've picked four already, because we already talked earlier about having difficulty trusting people and forming connections and relationships. So that can also be a
Hmm.
sign that trauma is present. What are some of the other things that we can highlight?
Lack of self-worth,
A lack of
lack
self-worth.
of self-worth, lack of belief in yourself.
Mm,
Because a lot of these things are actually more emotional than physical. And you actually even find that sometimes some of these things also begin to tell on your body physically. So you actually find people who these traumas, they are still experiencing these traumatic events, one way or they are still living it out one way or the other. No matter how long ago the event actually happened, they are still living it out, many years apart. And then it now begins to show up in the body, because our body is the instrument of our mind. So the thing that is going on in the mind, after a while, in fact, not even after a while, I mean, if for example you are thinking about, if you're excited about something, you're thinking about something that will really excite you. Let me give a practical example. I'm a football lover. So if I'm watching one of my favorite football teams playing football, or maybe I'm not even watching, I'm thinking about, one of my favorite teams, like England, for example, is going to be playing tonight. I'm just giving a practical example. And I'm already thinking about how that game is going to go. And I'm telling myself, oh, England is going to win. They're going to score this. You can already see that my eye is already that is opening up. My body is already showing the excitement of me feeling how that football match is going to go. So the thing that is going on in our mind always shows up in our body. So if you're thinking traumatic experiences, and you're always thinking of the negatives, you're always thinking of how bad the situation is. You're always thinking of the negative effects that it's been having in your life. It's at some point it's going to begin to show in your body as an ailment. And that's why we've also found, that there are some ailments, there are some sicknesses some people have, physical ailments, that you go to the hospital and the doctor is telling you, we can't see anything. And some doctors are now beginning to realize that this might be a case where they need to refer them to a therapist
Mm.
or a counselor to say, okay, I think what you need now is some healing in your mind. So, these things show up in our body, they show up in us not believing in ourselves, they show up in us not having any form of self-worth and self-value. And these are internal things that make us who we are. Because if you don't have self-worth, you don't have self-value, you don't believe in
Mm.
yourself,
Mhm,
you don't
mhm.
believe you can ever achieve anything, then you're just existing. You're just a moving corpse. Nothing
I
is
think
really
I
working.
think I think this is also why it gets to the point where you hear someone has killed themselves over a man, or a man has killed themselves over a woman. During
Mm,
the week, it was like, I don't know, consciously the universe was trying to send me the messages concerning this. First of all, my TED
mm,
talk, the links that were sent to me this week, two of them were basically talking about how men should speak up against domestic abuse. And I was like,
mm.
wow, wow, why are they sending me this? Very, very interesting TED Talk conversations about, men not just now saying, oh, we're not going to do it, but standing up for women and having the conversation more. Because whether we like it or not, as much as we recognize and appreciate that there are men who are going through, abuse, the
Oh yeah.
statistics are there to show that women suffer it more. And maybe that's why this man is saying to change the narrative, let men themselves begin to talk about it. By the way, we are looking for men to talk about it on this show. Okay, anyways. That's by the way. Men always seem to shy away from talking about it, maybe because of their
Mm,
ego. We talked about all that last week. But I read the story also of a man who committed suicide, killed his wife, killed the child, who was just about 2, 3 years old, and then killed himself. Hello, hello. Love is not supposed to be that. What is it?
mm,
Why? Murder suicide. Why? Why do we have to go? True love is not supposed to be that. But the fact is, there has been wound somewhere. It was not recognized. It was not picked on, and then it developed. So it's a big deal to have that lack of self-worth, to feel like your life don't mean anything without this person. Because you felt this person, because this has happened, or that has happened, then you no longer, some people define themselves by their relationship. And so if the relationship has now become the one that has gone sour, then life is over. But that should not be the case. We should have our identities, and I think that was one of the things we talked about last week, talking about solutions to stigma, is to build a sense of purpose for yourself. What's your purpose? What are you chasing? What do you want to do in life? Where are you going? Because that will really help you, to be able to stand up for yourself and say, I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm not going to be defined by
mm.
this experience that I have had. I'm not going to stay down. And this is not us, dusting over or trying to cover the experience. We're not downplaying it. We recognize that it is there, but it can be fixed, it can be worked on. If you first of all recognize that, okay, there's a problem, then the question is, how do I treat it? What can I do? So there's a whole lot of others. I don't know that Titi wants to add to the list of ways that we can identify some of this trauma associated with domestic abuse. Do you want to add to the list?
It's a long list,
I
really.
know.
It's a long and I'm just thinking about it like with the definition that we've given, it could
Yes.
be anything.
Yes.
It could be anything. And that's the chances of any human being not experiencing trauma is really, really slim with this
Yeah.
definition. So it could be just anything. So again, I'll go back to my point of just be open to getting better, because as you grow and you advance in life, you begin to pick up one or two things. And just like I talking about the universe bringing things to you, so at some point in life you begin to hear about something, hear about this notion or about this idea of trauma or the way it is related. Some things begin to click in your head to connect the dots. It is at that point that you need to be open minded to receive whatever it is God is telling you at that point. The challenge most times is that we are not open to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
So you start saying things like, this is just the way I am. There's no such thing as, there's no just the way anybody is. That's what I've come to realize. We are a product of our environment, of what we have learned. So because there are sometimes I think of it as, I think of myself as someone that has faith, someone that is a Christian, someone that believes. I
Mm-hmm.
imagine myself if I was probably born in Dubai or born in, you see some certain behavior, certain traditions, and you wonder, why I can't do that. Why are these people? No, you can. All you need to do is to be in their situation, be
Yeah.
in the
Mm.
environment they've been in, and you will learn it. That there are some kind of people, there's certain ways some people dress, you know, and because of the, for me, I get hot easily. So because of the way I am, I feel like I can't dress that way. Like, how do you breathe? You know, but sometimes I tell myself, you actually can. If I grew up in that environment and if that thing has been instilled in me right from when I was little, it becomes my way of life. It becomes the way, it's
Definitely.
normal for me. That's my normal.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as this is the way I am. Is that's just me? No, that is not just you. Picked it up from somewhere. You learned it from somewhere. So the list is very long and it is not exhaustible.
Exactly.
The main thing is for us to have an open mind as we go through life to become better people, because that's when we start identifying that this might be true. Because just like we said earlier on, you might not even know it's just in your subconscious. It takes another person or another event for you to pick it up and say, oh, this is what happened to me when I was young. It didn't click in my head, but probably this is the reason why I'm easily startled, or probably this is the reason why I don't want too close relationships. So we need to build ourselves to open to receive when it is time to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That is the time. The time to is the challenge, and I see and hear you. I hear what you're saying, Titi, and I also agree that to an extent, outside of domestic abuse, we all have had one or two traumatic experiences, and everyone might just have a little bit of it. I was saying to a group of people very close to me that we all have narcissist tendencies. One of them didn't take it lightly with me.
I think we talked about that last week.
Yeah, last week I was saying it right. That we all have narcissist tendency, and this lady was like, "No, no, what do you mean? Please define it. What do you mean?" She really couldn't get it. But the truth is, just like Titi said, there's a little bit of it in everyone, because you have primary school mates. Some people fought in school and had some traumatic experience from all those fights, those secondary school kind of fights, abuse, bullying, those kind. They're outside even of domestic abuse. There are a lot of other avenues through which one can have that wound. And so where the problem is when it begins to affect daily life, when it begins to affect your ability to connect with others, when it begins to affect your ability to live a productive life. Like the example I gave, God forbid, someone can take a gun, kill the wife, kill the child, a 2 3 year old
Mm.
child, for God's sake, and then turn on and kill himself. Now that is a problem. when it can get to the level where people become suicidal, when you get to the level where you're now saying, oh, I don't have any sense of self-worth, I don't feel like what am I even in this life for? Or you're having this regular outburst of anger.
Mm.
Nobody knows what they can do that will offend you. You're just easily angered and you're pouring on everyone. You're engaging in some risky behaviors. Like Yomi was trying to give example earlier of girls who maybe didn't have that fatherly love and affection, and the dependence, that father being there, a dependable figure, being there for them. You begin to see them jumping from one man to the other. They are looking for that daddy love that was missing, that validation they didn't get from their parents. So the level we're talking about is when it gets to that kind of level where it has now begin to impact your life. It's affecting you. It's making you make wrong choices. You cannot stay connected to people. You can't trust people. There's always a reason why somebody say hello. There's a reason behind that hello. Why did they say hello? They can't just wake up and say hello. Why did they just tell me hello? Why look at somebody that somebody can greet? I'm not even what somebody's greeting. You'll be shocked at the analysis that somebody will give a simple statement, and then there's always the fight, flight, free mode that people enter into. Some are forever running, and you're wondering what's chasing them. There are those who are
Mm.
frozen in one place, they're not making progress. They can't move away from, they can't move past that experience. And there are those, like I gave the example of those who are forever antagonizing, they are forever fighting. These are some of the things that you will see and you will know trauma is present. Trauma is present. Whether you've gotten this trauma from domestic abuse or you've gotten it from just having a bad childhood experience, maybe rape when you were young, sexual abuse, there are a whole lot of things that can contribute to trauma. What is what is most what I want us to project this evening is the fact that anyone can be healed. So let me ask the question: can trauma be healed? Can someone who has this wound, can they really get well from it? You me?
So before I even answer that question, as you were talking, what just came to me is, to even look at this thing from the perspective of the abuser,
Mm,
because hurt people because they are also
well,
hurting.
yep, yep.
So even for the abuser, they are hurting, and that's the only reason. That's all they have on the inside of them. So that's all they can give. So they are also hurting, and love people would love people. The more love that we have on the inside of us, the more we're able to love other people.
Mm,
So it really is a situation where both people have actually gone through various forms of trauma in their lives, and this is how they are playing it out. This is how they know how to play it out. But of course, trauma can definitely be healed. Definitely, it can definitely be healed. I mean, you know people would recommend prayers. Yes, I recommend prayers as well. Um, and in connection with prayers, I always say, go for counseling, because prayer is more effective if you know what you're praying for.
mm-hmm.
As opposed to when you go and you're just saying, God, just heal me.
Praying
And
amiss.
it's like,
That's what
you
James
know,
refers to when he say praying amiss.
exactly,
Yeah.
because you don't even know what the issues are. You don't even know what is really going on. All you know is that you feel like you are in a mess. And
Mm,
of course, the prayer can also be, okay, reveal to me exactly what this is all about. That
mm,
could be the beginning of the prayers, you know. But there's also counseling, there's counseling, there's therapy, there's speaking to someone who can help you through the trauma, um, to a place of healing, to a place of becoming, finding yourself again, and becoming the person that you want to be, most definitely trauma can be healed.
Titi, are we? Is it a tall order?
I think we know it that it can be healed. We know, I think majority of the population know. The challenge is identifying trauma, accepting that this is trauma. For some people, the trauma is accepting the trauma.
Yeah.
Is like saying, okay, what you are manifesting now is somehow connected to what you experienced growing up in your family. They are like, no, my family is, most people believe not that they come from
Perfect.
a perfect family, but they just feel like the family should be protected. Like, no,
Mm.
after everything that my family has given to me, after everything that my parents have done, and this is not to put the blame on parents, because at this point, once you are 18 plus, you can't continue to blame your parents for your behavior or what you're manifesting. You cannot
Mm,
blame on them. They
mhm.
did the best with what was available to them at that time. So this is not to put a blame on them. I'm just saying, but that does not mean that we shouldn't identify the mistakes they may have made, and learn from it. So that idea of saying your what you're manifesting now is connected to your family or to your sibling or to the experience that you've had, for some people is the trauma. They are like, no, 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 no. These people have been good to me. They are my rock. They are my solid base. How can you now say that they are my problem in quotes? But that's not the issue. The issue is not who to point accusing finger on. The issue is identifying what the problem is and looking for a way forward. So the major, we know that yes, there's trauma can be healed, but the major problem is, can it be identified? Would you accept it?
Very strong question. Would you accept it? Would you agree that there's a
Yeah.
problem? Would you agree that this attitude you're displaying, you know, is coming from a subconscious effect of a traumatic experience you may not even have understood was traumatic? And this is why we say talk to people. It can be hard. People, I don't
It
know why
is
people,
hard, Mama. It is
oh
hard.
God, I don't know why people run from counseling.
It is hard.
It does help to talk to professionals. They will guide you. And
Because
I like I like what it is said about family. You know, we all want to protect our family. So we want to project this good image of our
mm,
families, you know. I remember not quite long ago, 2, 3 weeks ago, someone was talking to me about how an uncle abused them in the family. And she mentioned it when she was young. And the thing became a problem between her and her mom because it was the mother's brother. So much so that for years, the mother was not talking to her. You want to bring shame upon our family. You want to disgrace my brother. You want to embarrass us. How can you even say this happened, that happened? Even the fact that she spoke about it and it was not accepted, was not agreed upon. That is even another traumatic experience on top of the trauma that she's experienced. Luckily for her, as would be the case with anybody who also don't deal with themselves, talking about the perpetrators, if they don't deal with the problem they have, it will definitely always lead to shame. This man has done it so publicly now to someone who has really, really taken it up and it has become a big deal. They are talking police, they're talking going to jail and stuff like that. Now the mother is coming back to beg the daughter, oh, I'm sorry, this, that. But the truth is, this girl spoke up. So there's even that fear of who's going to believe me. I remember that I was in that situation. Who is going to believe me? I had, as far as the world was concerned, I had one of the best marriage. Everyone out there wanted to be like me and my husband. You know, if God, if they are praying, they use my husband to pray. Lord, give me a husband like, and if they are praying for a wife, they use a wife like me. But they didn't know what we were dealing with behind closed doors. They didn't know what was going on. And even for me, I didn't know who do I go and tell? Where do I start? I remember the day I cornered Yomi. We were in school. And I just dragged that to the side. I was full. I didn't care that, this is practically almost like a stranger, but we're not so close then. But one, I knew she was a lawyer. She was a wife. She would have the experience. Pull that aside and say, this is me. This is what is going on with me. And you'll never really know, because sometimes we come out, we dress fine, we look good. You don't know what is going on in the background.
Yeah.
Totally, I agree that the first challenge is to recognize the issue, to get to a point where you say, this is not right. This is a problem. How do I begin to find solution? I
I
have a
also
question.
think that, yeah, sorry, before you ask the last one question, I also think that, our culture, and when I say our culture, specifically Nigerian culture, we
Mm,
don't support vulnerability. We don't support vulnerability. And for you to be able to heal from anything, you have to be vulnerable. And
mm,
vulnerability means, being able to say, okay, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. I have nothing to protect. There's no shame in this matter. Of
mm.
course, I know that, the last episode was talking about, the stigma with
Yeah,
it, you know. So people have to get to the point where they're like, you know what? There's nothing left. There's nothing left to protect. There's nothing left to be ashamed of. There's no shame. There's no guilt in this matter. All I want is, I want to be better. And people have to be vulnerable enough to come out and say, I'm both men and women, but our culture does not support vulnerability, especially for the men, but even women too.
true.
Even women too. A lot of people, and also it's because people have been vulnerable in the past, and they've been hurt by being vulnerable, and so they've told themselves, I will no longer be vulnerable. But
Mm,
we're not going to throw away the baby and the bathwater.
exactly. Titi, you were going to say something before I make one last point and we go, because now our time is up. I always say time is not our friend on this platform.
I was going to ask a question regarding because you're talking about being in that environment where because we're talking about domestic abuse and being in that environment where domestic abuse is happening and healing. Like how is it possible?
Possible. And
You
I like
know,
that you're asking me that question, but then I don't have the time to answer you. I don't have the time because the time is running. And that's one of the things I want to talk about when I say I want to become a guest on the show, so that you get to ask me these questions and I can answer it. And truthfully, I'm going to work out we're working on, I'm working on the second part of the year programs. For the second part of the year, I'm going to work out a day where I will share my story. And because I get that question a lot, I am still in the marriage. I didn't I did not divorce my husband. So it's the same man, it's the same marriage, and I'm still there. And people are thinking, How? How can you even say you're healed? If a friend of mine say, how can that kind of man still touch me? So the truth
Yeah.
is, at the point where it happened, there was separation and there was work on both sides. So to heal him, to heal myself, to pray for him, pray with me, to counsel him, to counsel me. And just like people didn't know what was going on then, apart from the time when we got suspended in church, we're church leaders when this was going on. I think that was when the church now became aware. If not, people didn't even know we're not in the same house. We're coming to church. We had separated. We worked on it separately. They started coming back as two people who are now working towards healing. Because I'm not going to tell you now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you now that we're perfectly healed. But the truth is, and I give it to my husband, I always say it, he's always willing to work. When you have someone who is working to be better, it's easy to meet them halfway. I'm working to be better because this thing is not one way. It's not a one-way street. That's another thing I've known from my experience. It takes two to tango. As much as there's no justification for someone to lay their hands on the other, sometimes there is your part in it, there's my part in it, there's his part in it. And we both have started learning what it means to heal, to learn each other, to forgive the unforgivable. That's the last point I was going to make before we leave. You know, some people can't even go past, they cannot fathom how they can forgive themselves and even forgive the abuser. So they sit with it, they sit with the trauma, they sit with the experience, they can't move past it. That is what God's grace gave us from a place of prayers. And that is why I agree with Sister Yomi when he said prayers. When we talk about it as Christians, people don't understand there's power in it. The grace to be able to forgive that thing that you think is unforgivable only comes from a place of prayers. And there was a lot of it. Thank God for a church like my church family. There was lots of prayers individually, collectively, together to help us be who we are today. That is why we can still be in it, not as victims, but as survivors who can now tell our story to others and say it's possible to heal from abuse. It's possible to still be in that environment, not remain
So
there.
this summary you've given
on.
now is not a substitute for the what this is by no means, because
Okay,
it's like I just wrapping everything up and saying
Okay, people, this is the tip of the iceberg. Titi really wants this gist, and she's
I
gonna.
want it, I want it, and I want to be asking the questions.
It's not about me
Have
today.
you?
We come to eat, and I will share the story. You know, I will share the story. That I've promised the viewers. I'll share my story because God told me He comforted me to comfort others, and that is the entire reason where this ministry of mending fences, counseling, love crusade, this is how it was born from my own experience, so that I can tell you that I've gone through it. God was with me. God went through it with me and my family. I had friends like Yomi. I had a family church. I remember at one point my mom did 7 days fasting and prayers. I had a very strong support system. My husband and I had a very strong support system. Okay, so we're not going to finish the story today. Let's move on.
We've not even
Forgive,
said anything, but let's just move on. Let's move on.
forgive yourself, forgive your abuser. That is one way to heal from trauma. I still have the book. There's a book I used to read then. It says Forgiving the Unforgivable. That book helped me. If you want it, I'll give you the name of the author maybe in the next edition. You go get it, you read it, prayerfully read it, and trust God for healing. Because above all that we're saying, the power to heal actually comes from God. God can heal you. God can heal you. I'm not saying, and please let's be very clear about this. I'm not saying you should remain in a place where you're still being abused and expect to be healed. This is a different thing. I think that's what Titi was asking. It's not, oh, they are still abusing you, you are there. They are still beating you, you are there. And then you say you are praying. No, 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 no. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that it has happened. The both of you have recognized that this has happened. It is not proper. Both of you have worked on it. Yes, the both of you can still heal together. And that marriage can still be mended. Anyways, those are my last thoughts for this evening. I don't know that you both have any other thing you want to add before we go, because our time is up.
Well, I totally agree. What I would just say finally is, um, look for someone to talk to. If you're going through domestic abuse or any abuse of any form, look for someone to talk to. You must have
Mm.
one person that you can be vulnerable with. Hopefully, it's somebody that their head is screwed on right.
Somebody that is like your me.
And
She did not say,
even if
hey,
that
pack your
person
load, pack
cannot
your
hear
load,
help,
pack your load, pack your load. All right, let's move on.
yeah, even if that person cannot directly help you, but at least the person would be able to find you help, you know. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, Titi, any last
Thank you.
words this evening before we move on?
I'll just say be open to accepting these things. It's difficult. I know they are hard truths to accept, but have an open mind to accept, and healing starts from there.
Yeah, that's true. Have an open mind to accept it. Accept that there's a problem. Accept that this has happened to you. We're not saying sit down and blame yourself. We're saying accept it. It has happened. What can I do to heal from it? Let your thoughts be around what can I do to heal from it. The thoughts of, oh, why me? What did I do wrong? Am I not to say what it is? It no, 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 no. That's not the one that helps. What helps is I have experiences. This is my experience. I own it as my experience. How can I be better from it? Because everything that happens to us either comes to make us better or break us. But it's our choice. You either choose to be broken by it and remain broken, or you can choose to heal and either move on from it and still live a very, very good, happy life. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Barrister Yomi. Thank you, Titi, for your time.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
madam.
you so much. You know, these conversations, when we're really, really, really having fun, it takes time. Please, thank you so much for coming. God bless you. I appreciate you. Next week, the conversation continues. Like I said, it's the entire month that we will be talking about domestic abuse. We'll come back again next week. God bless you. Until then, have a love-filled week, everyone. Bye. Bye.